Hi everyone. Last week I uploaded a song written by Irving Berlin that, while popular when it was first published, is certainly not as well known or iconic as some of Berlin's later songs like White Christmas or God Bless America. However, this song does have an interesting but unfortunately also very tragic backstory and was a very personal song for its creator. So today, let's learn more about the tragic origins and personal nature of the 1912 Irving Berlin hit, When I Lost You. After the first decade of the 20th century, Irving Berlin was an increasingly popular and successful songwriter. He had had several hits, the most popular of which was 1911's iconic and well-known Alexander's Ragtime Band. At the end of that year, or perhaps in early 1912, Irving Berlin was in his office one day when an aspiring singer came in and asked for the opportunity to perform for him in the hopes of securing a chance to promote a new song of his before the public. This young singer was Dorothy Getz. Although she was actually the younger sister of songwriter E. Ray Getz, with whom Berlin had collaborated on some songs in the past, she and Irving Berlin had not previously met. Now, before Berlin could address Dorothy's request or hear her sing, another aspiring singer came in and began to demand that she receive a song to sing as well. But Dorothy was apparently undaunted by this new arrival. According to Irving Berlin, Dorothy was a woman of spirit. She swung around a haymaking left and slapped the newcomer across the face. A full-fledged fight began, and although Berlin didn't like the fighting and tried to stop it, he also realized that while I had dreamed of people fighting for the right to sing my stuff, this was the first time I saw that dream come true. After the two young women had been separated, Irving Berlin gave a song to the second lady, but assuaged Dorothy's protests by asking her out on a date. It was a whirlwind romance, and within just a few weeks, the two were deeply in love, and Berlin asked Dorothy to marry him. He was only 23 years old, and she was just 19, but it seemed as if the two did truly love each other. Berlin compared Dorothy's beauty to that of a rose, and when he proposed, he told Dorothy if she married him, their lives would be like a bed of roses. Additionally, the fact that she was not Jewish did not seem to bother Berlin, and although there were some rumors that Dorothy was only marrying the songwriter for his money, there was no indication that this mattered to Dorothy at all. So, in February of 1912, the two traveled to Dorothy's hometown of Buffalo, New York, where her parents still lived, and were married in a simple ceremony. Afterwards, they sailed off to Cuba for their honeymoon. But while they were there, a typhoid epidemic broke out. At the time, there was only one early vaccine that was only really used by the British and American militaries, and treatment options were still fairly limited. Although the newly married couple quickly returned home, Dorothy had unfortunately already been infected, and shortly after their return to New York, she fell ill. Berlin had bought a new home for them in a luxurious apartment building in New York known as the Chatsworth, but instead of designing and decorating her new home or hosting dinner parties, Dorothy instead faced a worsening cold and persistent fever. While she languished in her illness, Berlin attempted to continue his work of writing lively and catchy songs. According to an early biography of Irving Berlin, while the doctors and the decorators were jostling each other in the hallway of this shiny new home, the anxious bridegroom was locked up in the front room, trying ludicrously to fulfill his contracts for jaunty songs long overdue. Dorothy's condition continued to worsen, and by the beginning of June, she had developed pneumonia. Although she then began to receive constant care from a Park Avenue physician, there was nothing he could do, and Dorothy passed away on the morning of July 17, 1912, barely 5 months after she had married Irving Berlin and at only 20 years old. The next day, Berlin held a brief service for her at their home, and shortly thereafter, Dorothy's body was sent to Buffalo for her funeral and interment at Forest Lawn Cemetery, where Berlin afterwards arranged for a single white rose to be delivered to his wife's grave every other day, and where her headstone can still be seen today. Dorothy's death affected Berlin deeply. He attempted to return to his songwriting, but without much success. Over the next few months, he wrote several songs, such as Keep Away from the Fellow Who Owns an Automobile, published in August, and Do It Again, published in October. But they were all joyless and mechanical numbers, and they inevitably fizzled. Although Berlin's friend and briefly brother-in-law, Ray Getz, took him to Europe shortly after Dorothy's death, it didn't seem to help much, and he spent almost the entire month of August in seclusion at home. But a few months later, Berlin began a process that would help him on his road to recovery. He once more returned to his songwriting, but this time avoided penning the typical novelty or dance numbers he had been writing, and instead, for the first time in his career, based a song on his own personal experience. He wrote directly about his wife's death instead of avoiding it, and the result was a song unlike any he had previously written. When I Lost You was a beautiful ballad whose lyrics directly referred to the loss Berlin had experienced and the pain and anguish he was feeling as a result. Lines such as, "The birds ceased their song, right turned to wrong, sweetheart, when I lost you," and "I lost the gladness that turned into sadness when I lost you," expressed some of the things he was really feeling. And the music, according to one analysis, was an exceedingly simple and stately waltz employing a bittersweet harmony underneath the melody, although the extent to which Berlin contributed to the harmony and arrangement of his songs is questionable. While When I Lost You was a deeply personal song for him, the business side of Tin Pan Alley songwriting was apparently too strongly ingrained in Berlin for him to ignore the song's commercial potential. When I Lost You was registered for copyright on November 8, 1912, and was published shortly thereafter by his Tin Pan Alley publishing company of Watterson, Berlin, and Snyder. And although Berlin did not actively plug this song in the same way he did most of his other songs, the fact was that much of the public already knew the story of his wife's death, and as a result, the song sold very well. By 1913, it had become Berlin's first hit ballad, selling 1 million copies of sheet music. Additionally, the song did receive some of the same dispassionate, practical, promotional treatment as many other songs of the day. On the back page of a 1913 Irving Berlin song titled Anna Liza's Wedding Day, there was an advertisement for and sample of When I Lost You, featuring a picture of Irving Berlin and the statement, "This is the best song I ever wrote." And at the bottom, the declaration that this song was for sale by all dealers. One analysis states that Dorothy's death, or to be more specific, Berlin's feeling about her death, was now one more item for sale on Woolworth's shelves. And this commercialism continued as the song maintained its popularity over the next several decades. It continued to sell as sheet music and was recorded by several different artists such as Bing Crosby, the Mills Brothers, Frank Sinatra, and Perry Como. It can even be heard in the film The Cat's Meow, a 2001 historical drama starring Kirsten Dunst, Eddie Izzard, and Cary Elwes. And it was even more recently recorded by the Paragon Ragtime Orchestra for their album Irving Berlin, This Is the Life, released in 2015, over 100 years after the song was first written. But despite this widespread popularity and the somewhat crass commercialism that facilitated it, When I Lost You was nonetheless a very personal song with a very touching sentiment. The death of his young wife hit Berlin hard and affected him for years to come. He seemed to become more inward, less trusting of the world around him, and more dedicated to his songwriting, all as a result of this tragedy he had experienced. But the impact of this tragedy was somewhat lessened by the process of writing When I Lost You. It ended up being a transformative song for Berlin that really did help him get over the awful circumstances of the death of his young wife. It gave him his first chance to voice his great unhappiness in the only language that meant anything to him, provided him with a way to come to terms with her death and overcome the accompanying grief, and seemed to give him closure. It also provided Berlin with a very fitting, for him, manner in which to honor his wife's memory. Regardless of the future success of this song individually, perhaps its greatest success was the future it helped facilitate for Irving Berlin by allowing him to overcome and move on from this early tragedy that might have otherwise derailed his fledgling songwriting career. We can't say for sure, but we know at least, as we listen to it, that it really does relay the true, distraught emotions of a young man who had just recently lost his beautiful new bride. And it's also clear that this song was able to fulfill, for its composer at least, one of the most powerful things music can achieve: the ability to touch our souls, provide us with comfort and healing in times of difficulty, and help transform our lives. Thanks for watching.